I don't usually do that. In other words, it doesn't usually take me long to tell someone how I converted to Islam, or should I say, how I came back to Islam. You know, when people find out that you've become a Muslim, they always ask the same questions. How did your parents react? Were you in love with a Muslim woman? Are you accepted within the Muslim community as a convert? But above all, people ask me, why did you convert to Islam? I find it shocking that even Muslims ask me why I converted to Islam. Well, that's the true religion, remember, is my usual response. I didn't crash my car into a tree and almost die. I didn't have a moment when I saw the light. I don't even know exactly how I became a Muslim. Some people are surprised, but I wasn't even looking for God. I wasn't looking for a reason in life. I wasn't looking for a purpose. In fact, I was just looking for a book. I went into a bookstore without knowing what I was going to buy. It must have been 2003 or 2004. I like to read, with a particular interest in books sold in the recent history, philosophy, and sociology sections. It was there that a green book caught my eye. It was called Islam, Values, Principles and Reality. I held it in my hand, looked at it and realized that I knew some Muslims, but had no idea what they believed in. However, Islam is mentioned all the time in the news and seems to influence domestic and international affairs. I decided to buy the book and see what this religion was all about. I walked up to the counter and bought the book, not imagining the 4.5-year journey I had just embarked on that would lead me straight to my Shahada, testimony of faith. Before I started reading about Islam, I already had some negative associations related to it in my mind. For example, I wondered how a practicing Muslim could consider himself a good, devout person while oppressing his own wife. Or, I wondered why Muslims worshipped a cubic stone in Mecca, if statues or buildings have no power and can't help anyone. I couldn't understand why Muslims were so intolerant of other religions, instead of simply saying that everyone believes in the same God. With that in mind, I started reading. After the first book came the second. After the second, the third and so on. After a few years I had read some books on Islam and was very surprised. I discovered that almost everything I thought was part of Islam and opposed, Islam in fact also opposed. The Prophet Muhammad, may God's mercy and blessings be upon him, had said that you can tell how good a believer is by the way he treats his wife. I discovered that Muslims do not worship the Kaaba and that, on the contrary, they oppose the worship of statues or the like. I discovered that Islamic civilization throughout its history, except perhaps the most recent periods, has been the best example of religious tolerance on the face of the earth. I didn't have to be convinced about most of the things Islam tells us to do or how to behave, as I found that I already agreed with many basic rules before learning about Islam. I read my own opinion on many subjects, but the books kept saying, "That's Islam." There wasn't much dua being done in my neighborhood at the time. Well, not proactively. The help I got was what I asked when I talked to the people around me. That doesn't say everything about how dua is organized in the Netherlands. I just didn't have people around me who were very involved in it. So when Ramadan came I decided to give it a try. No book can tell you what it's really like. I went to my Muslim co-workers and told them I would fast with them. I bought a Quran and found the 30-day schedule on the internet. When I told the others about reading the whole Quran and fasting in Shawwal, the lunar month after Ramadan, some of them had never heard of it or done it. I bought milk and dates for work and explained that it was a sunnah to be followed. Their mothers or wives cooked the meals we ate at work, so I tried some new foods too. I learned a lot that Ramadan and so did the others. And we had a lot of fun. My first Eid was a funeral, but for the rest, it was a wonderful month. After Ramadan, I went to the mosque to pay my zakat. I realized that giving money to a good cause is the right thing to do, so not being Muslim was no reason for me not to pay. It was here that I met the treasurer of the mosque in my town for the first time. He asked if I was a Muslim. "No sir, I'm not a Muslim," was my reply, "but I have fasted the month of Ramadan." He told me to go slowly and not to rush. The months passed and I continued reading books about Islam. Most of the books I read were by non-Muslims, like Karen Armstrong. I also took time to read what people were saying that was negative about Islam. I read about religiously motivated terrorism, about conflicts between civilizations and so on. However, I found that for every question I could ask, Islam had a convincing answer. This doesn't mean that the Muslims I spoke to always had a convincing answer, but most of the information I gathered about Islam came from these books. At the end of the following Ramadan, I went to the mosque to pay my zakat. I met the treasurer again and he recognized me. He asked again if I was a Muslim. "No sir, I'm not a Muslim," was my reply, "but you told me to take it easy, right?" He calmly shook his head and said, "Yes, go slowly, but not too slowly." I started my last year as a non-Muslim. I had already stopped drinking alcohol. I had stopped smoking. I tried to encourage myself and others to do good, and to prevent myself and others from doing wrong. I went to Turkey on holiday and visited the inside of some of the big mosques. With every step I took, with every day that passed, I could feel God's presence growing in my life. I observed nature and, for the first time, I could see that what was in front of me were signs of the Creator. I tried praying a few times, something I'd never done before, which obviously didn't look much like the way I pray today. I continued reading, but now I also started getting information about Islam on the internet. On Hives, a popular Dutch social network, I was approached by a Dutch convert. She asked if I was a Muslim and I told her that I wasn't yet. She asked me to go to her house and meet her husband. He was a practicing Muslim by birth, born in Egypt. He and I had dinner together and then talked for the rest of the evening about Islam. The second time I went there he showed me the correct way to pray, at my request. I tried to do the best I could while he watched me try. When we took a short break, he asked me a question. "So, do you think you're ready to do this?" "Yes, I think I'm ready." I realized that I had already become a Muslim. I hadn't done my Shahada yet and it wasn't official, but at some point in the previous years I had become a Muslim. I had come to believe that there is no deity to worship other than the one true God, the Creator. That Muhammad was his messenger, the final messenger, who had participated in the completion of the religion. I wanted to fast, pay zakat, make my salah, prayers, and I still dream about the Hajj every day. My path was through books, I came through theory. It was a rational choice, not an emotional one. I looked at the information that was there, compared it and contemplated. Islam was the answer to all the questions. A week or two later, he and I went to the mosque in his town. He had already spoken to the imam and they knew I was going. My father went along and took a camera. The imam said the Shahada, little by little. I repeated it, little by little. While the imam recited a dua, supplication, my Egyptian brother translated it into Dutch for me. I felt as if I had run many kilometers and had now reached the finish line. I mean that literally. I was out of breath, as if I had been running. I slowly caught my breath and felt calm and happy. Suddenly I realized, finally, that I had become Nordine. I went to the mosque in my town. When I entered the building, I met the treasurer. He asked me again if I was a Muslim. Yes, sir, and my name is Nordine, I said with a smile. Alhamdulillah, he replied, adding quickly, finally.